Good evening. I'm Pastor Vernon Shazier. Welcome to our monthly men's huddle, man to man. If you're tuning in for the very first time and you're wondering what is man to man all about, it is men sitting around having a dialogue and a conversation like we do in the barber shop and under the tree and other places where men gather. But what makes this huddle unique is that we talk about conversations and issues that impact us as men, as fathers, as husbands, and the goal is through dialogue, through candid, open, unchased, honest dialogue, we walk away from these discussions as better men, better husbands, better fathers, and to live at a higher place when it comes to manhood. Once again, I'm glad to have with me to my left, Brother Chancellor Howard, and to my right, Brother George Knox. How y'all doing this evening? Y'all ready to get it going?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You got a hot topic going this evening for sure.
Okay, once again, we have been looking and reading and engaging this book written by Patrick Means called Men's Secret War. If you have not purchased the book, I encourage you to purchase it. It is a transformative journey. We have talked about men who play the role as superhero, always trying to rescue everyone else when they themselves often need rescuing. We've talked about the necessity to rewrite your life script. All of us in our developmental years, our child and our adolescent years, we are taught and we have scripts that are instilled in us, rules that we have placed in our life that we're told we're supposed to live by, and our life is supposed to be governed by. And often those scripts are not healthy scripts. Often those scripts are detrimental to us living our highest life as a man, as a husband, as a father. And so the good thing about life is that once you recognize that you're living out a script that is not healthy, you can rewrite it. And so we've been challenging you to have a candid, honest conversation with yourself about yourself and to examine the script that you're living out to see, is there some areas that you're living out scripts that need to be written? We've talked about the elusive father blessing. All of us as young boys, young men, there is a desire, there is a longing, there is this need to have affirmation. There's want for our fathers or a father figure to affirm us, but often we see this not taking place. And I believe when we talked about that, Brother George said it is elusive because many fathers are on the run. And so we're challenging you. If you are an elusive father, you're on the run, your son, your daughters, they want to have a relationship with you. They desire that. We've talked about last week, you can't heal what you don't feel. Many pains that we deal with as men, they're living in our subconscious, and so they don't get addressed. Tonight's topic, I believe it's going to really touch a lot of people, because as I read this chapter, and I'm sure as y'all read it, a whole lot of thoughts popped up into your mind, and probably some people. Tonight's topic is when the hits don't keep coming. Patrick Means in this chapter that he entitles When the Hits Don't Keep Coming, he's using this metaphor of an adrenaline junkie. And basically what he's talking about, and again, this may hit many of you, and I'm sure it will hit you right between the eyes. Ming says that many men are living and embracing a value system that encourages them to sacrifice marriage, family, and personal life to achieve goals. And he describes this type of behavior, those who embrace and live out this value system, as an adrenaline junkie. We can start with you, Chancellor. What were some of the first thoughts that jumped into your mind as you began to read this chapter and listen to Mings describe this value system that so many men live out? Again, it's a value system in which our families are neglected, friends are neglected, marriages are neglected, and even our own personal health are neglected because we are pursuing goals.
Well, Pastor, in full transparency, as I navigated my way through the chapter, the more and more I got into it, the more and more I saw some flaws in my own behavior in regard to the subject matter this evening. And because I have been known, most of my adult life has been spent on active duty in the Marine Corps. And during that time, I developed a reputation, so to speak, as a go-to person. No matter what rank it was that I had, it was always go take it to Sergeant Howell or go take it to Staff Sergeant Howell. And so you can get caught up in to doing that and trying to be everything to everybody. Mm-hmm. And then you wound up sacrificing the needs of yourself. So that immediately, within the first chapter, within the first couple of paragraphs, it made me reflect on that go-to person that almost became mechanical.
Yeah, I said, wow. Let me read it to you again then, George. I want to hear what some of your initial thoughts. Men are living and embracing a value system that encourages them to sacrifice marriage, family, and personal life to achieve goals.
Well, the first thing that I honestly thought about was the black man's burden. When I spoke to the pastor earlier, I said I didn't like this chapter. And a part of the reason was that the value system is a legitimate value system. The perception of the man as head of the household, responsible for taking care of providing for the household, is a value system and a goal that is noble. The means by which you achieve it is what I call the black man's burden, because black folk, because of economic circumstances, because of the history that we have of exclusion and indifference, have to work harder in order to obtain these noble value systems. And so our fatigue is a little greater. Our need to wonder about where the next meal is coming from and how to spread out limited resources is a little more difficult because our income is generally a little bit lower. The risk of losing our jobs is a little bit greater. And so we are burdened additionally by conditions that we often find ourselves in through no fault of our own in order to meet the goals and in order to pursue that value system. And my issue then becomes, how can we even overcome the fact that we're working longer and harder with more pressure externally and internally as we try to live out the goals and as we try to live up to the values and expectations that we have from family, loved ones, and friends.
I think you make a great observation, George. Here's the tension. I found a lot of tension in this topic, in this chapter. Here's the tension, and George just threw out some of the initial tension. We have, for cultural, for economics, historical, a multitude of reasons, been placed in a position where we are born and we inherit this heavy burden. So many people depend on us. We carry the title patriarch. We want to be overachievers. We have to take care sometimes our family and extended family. In many cases, many males have this burden placed on them at a very young age. And so here is the tension. We have this burden that's on us, but if the burden is not balanced, it can destroy us or tremendously weaken us. And that's where many men are. But then, on the other hand, there are some who, as Means described them, are adrenaline junkies. That there's never a place of satisfaction that they seem to be able to arrive at. And they're constantly chasing more and more and new goals and bigger goals, and they're here, there, and everywhere. And in the midst of that, home is being neglected. Their own personal health is being neglected. This is an issue that has some tension in it. I have a practice, and I think I've been practicing it almost 30 years. Whenever I find myself in a position where I'm talking with someone older, or someone prominent who's accomplished a lot, I'll ask them the question, what are some of your biggest regrets in life? And there is never, I don't think I can count one time that family was not mentioned. If they didn't say family, they said my children. And so this whole idea that Means introduces in this picture that he paints of men, even though it's not a bottle or it's not a joint or a pipe, this deep desire, when it's unmanaged, when it's not balanced, when it gets out of control, that addiction can be as damaging to our lives and to the lives of others that are connected to us as an alcoholic, as a drug addict.
And I think that's a very important point in this sense. Because the burden is greater, it's not an excuse for not devoting the time and attention to family. So, yeah, you got a heavier burden, but we have to also remember that nobody had a burden as far as being a shepherd is concerned than Christ himself. And Christ himself took time to unplug, as they say, to relax, to find ways to lay the burden down for a moment. And the other part of it is this idea of the adrenaline, because you become helpless and subject to this need that you have, even to overachieve, because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about what it is that creates this imbalance. We're trying to identify the fact that there is an imbalance and it has a cause, and the cause is universal. So whether I'm running a multi-million-dollar corporation or whether I'm a gardener, when I'm addicted to this need to achieve at the expense of my own well-being, I got a problem.
Well, let me say this to your point, George. We are all successful black men, I would like to think, and we are all task-oriented. And so how many times, and even those of you who are watching, how many times have you been tasked with, a mission, so to speak, or something to do, and you didn't have all the resources to do it, but the expectation was for you to accomplish it in that set amount of time that was set forth. And so a lot of times when I reflect on what you all just said, a lot of times we as black men, we're trying to escape something. So the escapism factor comes in when we result to going from one extreme to the other. And that's where that adrenaline kicks in. It's just force of habit.
And I hope this is resonating with those of you who are watching this, because I'm sure if you have not wrestled with this, you know someone who has. Mean says this here, and I want to share this for those who are viewing and watching. He says this adrenaline addiction, this thirst and drive we need to constantly be accomplishing and achieving one goal after the next, he says it's an invisible addiction to many people. Now that caught my attention there. It's an invisible addiction. One of the things that it made me think about is how many times have we justified our neglect of our family, of our personal life, a whole lot of things, as we're pursuing to accomplish all these goals and acquire and acquisition more and more and bigger, we've justified it by saying, I want my children to have more than I had. I want my children to be in a better situation than I was in. But there's a reality, and that is that many children who, again, wants to have that relationship with their father are in a place where they're dealing with an elusive father, but the elusive father doesn't understand he's elusive because he don't understand that he is an adrenaline junkie, and though he is giving and providing his children with, a great house and a whole lot of material things, he's not giving them himself. He's not giving him his time. And Ming says this addiction is invisible to many men. And so if that's you, I hope some light bulbs will light up. I hope you will take some time and pause and think about this. Because, have you heard that said? I want my children to have more, I want my family to have more. And then before you know it, your children are graduating from high school, and yes, they've had a nice house and they've had nice clothes and a whole lot of toys and gadgets, but they never had daddy. And now they're graduating from high school and they've left the house, and now daddy is chasing them, trying to have a relationship. And in many cases, it's hard to develop and build that relationship once that child has left the home.
Well, you know, it reminds me of a song, and if you have the time, I encourage you to look it up, YouTube it, and play it. And it's called The Cats in the Cradle. Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Stone.
Now, Chancellor is the song expert. He knows every song for the last 40 years, you know, and he can sing them too. Yeah.
Don't
Often
believe
when we're sitting in discussion, he'll break out and start singing a song. So go ahead with your song. Go ahead.
Yes, but you really listen to that song, and I even shared that with my father, and I shared you all last month that my biological father is not the person who raised me, even though we're very close now. And I shared that song with him, and we had a fireside chat about it. But it talks about what we're talking about now, and it's that void, because the intangible in that relationship between father, or let me just group parents in general, because mothers play a vital role as well. But the intangible is that time in giving of themselves, because we can look good out in the public. We can look real good, but internally, if you were not blessed or fortunate to have a parent, and George told a story last month about when he did that hook slide and how important it was for him, and, you know, for you to be able to do that, and your father to be able to witness it. That's very important. And you can't get that time back if you don't seize the opportunity now. And that's why we're having this conversation. And I'm just as guilty, because I have a 12-year-old grandson that, as I read this, and I'm the father figure in his life, it's very important that I spend time with him, because you can't get that time back once they've graduated high school and become adults on their own.
And again, he says, for many men, this addiction is an invisible addiction. My mother had 3 boys, one girl. Me and both of my brothers, we played sports, multiple sports. Prior to my parents' divorce, we had a nice home. We had nice automobiles, vehicles. We had toys, everything. We had no material needs. But my father never saw me play a football game, a baseball game, a basketball game, running a track meet. I don't think he ever saw my baby brother running a track meet or playing a football game. I think he attended one of my oldest brother's football games. I believe if I had a conversation with my 2 brothers, we would trade in some of the material things for his time, for him being at that game.
That's my point right there, Pastor.
And I hope this grips some of you who are viewing, because your children, they want you, at the end of the day, they want you. You are more valuable to them than material possessions. Give them what they need, but don't get caught up in trying to make, toys, clothes, gifts, all the other things we give our kids, a proxy for you being in their life, for you being at their events, for you being at their activities. My father went there. Let me just show you the power of it, just psychologically and emotionally. My father never saw me play a game, but my mother worked 2 jobs, and I knew what time she got off on Friday nights, and I knew that normally she would arrive to the game the second quarter, and it was just something in me that second quarter I knew Mama was going to be in the stands, and second quarter whoever was across from me, they was getting ready to get it worse than they was getting it already because Mama was there then. Something about Mama just made me turn up the fire. Because Mama was watching me, and this is true in many kids, that because in us, we have this desire to please, and we want our Father to be proud of us. But we lose that, and we miss that, and we're robbed of that when he's elusive, he's ghost, he's not there. But so many times, I see us trying to make a toy our proxy. There are millions of kids right now. They would prefer riding in a Toyota and you spending time with them than riding in a Mercedes. They would prefer you being at their events and involved in their life than them living in a 4,000 square foot home. See, this is what means is getting at. So some of the things that we do, they are excessive. And then we try to justify by saying, I want them to have more than than I had. But because this addiction, he says, is invisible in many cases to us, we may be giving them more materially, but giving them less emotionally and psychologically and relationally.
Well, and let me complicate things. It also may relate to the quality of even limited time that's available for parenting given the burden. Okay? Because here's the daddy's argument. I'm tired when I get home. You've seen me drop my head into the plate because I couldn't even hold my head up long enough to eat dinner. Your friends laughed at me when I went to your band concert after I had worked 12 hours in the day, couldn't keep my eyes open and started snoring. Now, again, these are not excuses. We rationalize, we justify, and we make excuses because the duty is still there. But there's also this element of son, daughter, kids, okay? I know I don't spend too much time with you, and I, honest to goodness, want to. But I'm working hard every day to provide you with the things, the necessities of life, and to make sure that you have a nice, healthy, happy childhood. But I'm making the wrong sacrifice. I'm sacrificing my relationship with you rather than sacrificing the time that I spent in pursuit of things that are material. Help me. And if I slip, call it to my attention, okay? Daddy, when I saw you fall asleep at my concert, I laughed too, but I said, that's my hard-working daddy who made a sacrifice in order to be present, that I could feel that presence. And so this is the conversation that can take place where understanding can be achieved. But Dad, I just need you there. Sleep or not sleep, I just need you there. And that comes with being open about the addiction and open about the need. And then that stuff gets really powerful and that bond gets really tight.
You know, I wonder, often are we being honest and truthful when we say the reason why I have all of this and I pursue all of these things is I want my children to have more. I want them to have better, bigger. Often I wonder, are we being honest? Is it really that we want them to have more or we want to have more?
Well, I think it's a little of both, Pastor. And you got to keep in mind from whence most of us have cometh. The caste system in which we had certain things handed down to us from prior generations are far and few in between. I don't know many black people who had allowances that, on a scale of 3 figures, let alone 6 figures per month. All right, so a lot of times we want better because we're trying to break a vicious cycle. So what I don't want to happen, and you all out there who are watching this, don't misconstrue that the adrenaline that we have, or I'll speak for myself, that I have, that I don't want better for my family. But you hit a key point, Pastor. It's having a balance with doing those things, because you can do anything you do too much is going to be counterproductive. So no one's beating you up by being task oriented, but if you don't have a balance, then there is a problem.
And I think that's the key. And we don't have balance. And there's so many children, male and female, who are living a life in which they're in a place where they're longing for a relationship with their father, but he's elusive. They play with the toys, but they just play with them for a little while, and then they go on to another toy. But at some point, I think the kids even get to an age where they're able to understand psychologically things better, and there is a resentment that begins to build. Why aren't you at my play? Why aren't you at my game? Why aren't you at my recital? They get to the point where they don't even love the things that we're giving them. And we think that the things we're giving them are making them happy, but they're sad because, again, time spent with us, attention given to them by us affirming them and giving them affirmation is of more value to them and more desired by them than the toys and the material things. Now, quite naturally, they like the material things, but they cannot replace the reality that every child has this desire to have a relationship with their father that is nurturing and affirming. Now, I hear George try to make an argument, and he keep pushing that argument, and I'm listening to him keep pushing his argument. We got this heavy burden, we got this heavy burden, we got this heavy burden, and that this is why the man is unable to spend some certain amount of time. But Ming says that one of the problems is that we have an overspending habit.
Ooh, man.
He says we have an overspending habit. When I read that, I said, wow. I threw my hands up. I said, wow. He says that we have an overspending habit. Does that not describe America? Does that not describe the context we live in? Does that not add more tension to this challenge, to this conversation where we are literally born in a context where we are taught and groomed to chase and pursue and apprehend with all that we can the American dream? And this is what makes us valuable. This is what makes us accomplish. And so in our attempt to achieve and grab hold to the American dream, to feel accomplished, we overspend on things, and we leave our home cheapened.
And I think that is the detour, because we have now distorted the value system by adding something to it as a requirement that the value system don't call for. Love of family, attention to family, taking care of yourself are the values. But we've been deceived into thinking that in order to obtain those values, those spiritual values, if you will, the only evidence is material demonstration and material exhibits. And therefore, the only way I can be perceived as a good father is if I provide certain things to my kids. Now what we've done is to let others allow us to pursue a fake value system, because we're not interested in our family, like the pastor said. We're not interested in living within our means efficiently. What we're interested in is making sure that others see us in this competitive world of acquisition, okay, as successful. And none of that has anything to do with the values themselves.
Let me read this. While I'm reading this, I want you to ask yourself this question. Are you an overspender? Are you overspending your time on things, on work, on your pursuit of external goals, and you're so overspent that, using the metaphor George has thrown out, when you do get home, you're out of gas, you're slumped over. You're not able to sit upright at the table, you're tired. You sit in the chair and you've dozed off in a matter of 3 minutes. And so you're in the house, but there's no conversation, there's no dialogue, there's no rich interaction between you and your children. So you don't have to be outside of the house to be an elusive father, an elusive parent. You can live in the house with your children and still be an elusive parent, an elusive father. Again, I want you to think about that question. Are you living a life where you overspend externally and you have very little to give internally when you come home, when you're with your family, when you're with your children. Because what is the difference between you being in the house but you're asleep? There's no interaction. What's the difference between you being at the recital and you slept through it and your daughter, while she was up there giving her speech or performing, she saw you sleeping? Because who is she looking for when she's on the stage? She's looking for daddy. This overspending is something we have to address. Let me look at this. Let me read this into it. He says, an honest look at what fueled our adrenaline addiction is necessary. Also, here's some things he threw out. An emphasis on doing, achieving, and producing. But isn't that what we're taught? Isn't that the way of the West, the ideology of America? You've got to do it all. You have to achieve it all. You have to have it all. And in doing so, you suffer, you go neglected, and in many cases, your family definitely is neglected.
Pastor, I want to ask a question to you all and the audience. How many times, not counting the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and we've built the Super Bowl up to be an event that we call a family dinner as well, but it's not. But think about how many times throughout the year that you actually have dinner with your family without any distractions, such as handheld media, TV, beepers. Well, they don't make beepers anymore, but you understand what I'm saying. And I think that contributes to why we have that gap, because of these distractions. And therefore we don't have the opportunity to conversate, to see what's going on in our children's minds.
Well, it goes back to, again, when Ming says that this addiction is invisible for many men. Many men are not processing and thinking about the impact of their behavior, what they're missing out on, what is being neglected, how the family dynamic is being shaped when you sit down to dinner and everyone is messing with or interacting with a device. We've gotten to the point now where even when we're together in the same space, quality time is not given to each other. And before you know it, again, you have this invisible addiction that's manifesting itself. And before you know it, your child is going to the prom. I mean, one of my closest friends, he's a friend and a mentor, prominent individual, prominent man. When I asked him that question, what are some of your biggest regrets? He was silent for about 3 minutes. And then for the next 5 minutes, he cried uncontrollable. And after gathering himself, He said, I've traveled around this nation. I've spoken, given over 1,000 speeches. I've stood on major platforms in arenas. But I have no relationship with my children. When they call a house, they ask to speak to mama. But they never ask to speak to me. I'm sharing this, and we're having this conversation again. The goal of this conversation is for us to put on the table issues that are having a detrimental impact in our life. And not just our life, but in the lives of others who are connected to us, because nobody serves time alone. Whatever addictions, whatever vices, whatever it is that we're wrestling with, those who are connected to us, they also find themselves entangled in that web. And so if you are an elusive father, if you are an adrenaline junkie, as Means is talking about in his chapter, where you give so much energy, so much time to the external, trying to achieve goals, and you want to keep climbing the corporate ladder and get more and more titles, but your home is being neglected. You're not only hurting your life personally and neglecting your life personally, that impact is also being felt by your children, your wife, your significant other. And if this conversation is one that has your name on it, own it. Allow it to awaken you. We're having these conversations every month because we want these conversations to challenge us, inform us. We want to walk away with the mindset to do better and be better. Let me name what means. He says these are some of the things that fuel this adrenaline addiction that cause us to be junkies, to overspend outside of our homes. He says emphasis on doing, achieving, and producing. The American educational system and culture teaches us that. He says, secondly, the need to medicate emotional pain. Let's talk about that one. So some men are dealing with pain that they don't want to address, and they're trying to fill that hole by obtaining trophies and plaques and, climbing corporate ladder, and achieving more and more. But if there is a hurt that is so deep that it has created a hole in their heart, no trophy, no accolade, no raise can fill that. That needs to be dealt with. That needs to be confronted. It needs to be addressed. Thirdly, he says, a false workaholic theology. A false workaholic theology. George mentioned this earlier. When you read the Bible, Jesus makes it clear that he was about his Father's business. In fact, in one narrative, when his parents find him in the synagogue and they begin to interrogate him and question him, he says, don't you know I'm about my Father's business? But even in the midst of him being about his Father's business and his Father's business being a priority, he took time. He was intentional. And he was still a way to rest. to recuperate. The crowds wore him down. The expectations, the labor would get so heavy and intense. When you read through the narrative of Jesus' life, you constantly see, and crowds follow him, and this crowds and crowds. But you also see him stealing away, slipping away for rest.
Here's another curveball.
Throw your pitch.
Well, and it's about the invisible addiction. And it not only affects work, it can also affect service, just like the pastor was talking about. Because Means in the book talks about this couple that where their family was disintegrating because both father and mother was spending 4 nights a week at the church doing church business, okay? And so it is whatever it is that drives you with a sense of compulsion and an absence of balance that is affecting that adrenaline, because you can still, you don't have to be thinking about the job. You can be thinking about your committee work. You can be thinking about other things that are distractions from the opportunity to relate deeply with your family. It can be recreation. I have a good friend who was a competitive bicyclist. We were talking about that, and he was so committed to his competitive bicycling that it troubled his marriage because his family thought that he was ignoring them in order to pursue his passion, his fun passion, his fitness passion. And that's what makes adrenaline addiction so dangerous, because we think we're drinking Kool-Aid. Well, heck, I'm spending 4 nights a week at church serving, okay? And so it is an equal opportunity destroyer. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not only related to work, it's related to those things that cause you to compulsively pursue an activity that is costing your relationship with your loved ones.
Well, I think you're addressing again the overspending problem. And so here's what we have to understand, my brothers, and we may have some sisters watching too, but particularly we're talking in this conversation is aimed towards brothers. God has created us as finite creatures, which means we have limitations. Okay? We have limitations. We only have so much time, and we only have so much resource. If you're going to be a father, a husband, where there is a healthy culture in your home, you have to embrace this truth. You only have so much time. You only have so much money. You cannot, listen, you're not omnipresent like God. You can only be in one place at a time. I'm going to share this story with you because we're getting near to our time. Some years ago, a friend of mine called me and he asked me would I come and speak for his pastor's anniversary. And I told him I couldn't. I declined. And so he said, okay. And 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was him calling me back. And when he called back, he said, Vernon, let me ask you a question. I said, what's your question? He said, what did I do to offend you? I said, why would you ask me that? You haven't done anything to offend me. He said, 3 years in a row, I've called and invited and asked you to preach my pastor's anniversary. And 3 years in a row, you've declined. You've said no. I thought we was friends, and I think of you as a friend. And so, did I offend you? Did I say or do something to offend you? And I chuckled and laughed, and I said, no, my brother, you've never said or did anything to offend me. I say every year your anniversary is the same time. I say every year your anniversary is when my son is playing football. I say, I've said no to you because I understood that if I said yes to you, I would be saying no to my sons. What's my point? I want y'all to get this. You only have a certain amount of time and resources. When it comes to time, when it comes to you choosing what projects you're going to take on, what all you're going to put your hands to it, what all endeavors you're going to pursue, you have to think with the mindset, I only have a certain amount of time. I'm limited. You need to know when you say yes, what you're saying no to. And when you say no, what you're saying yes to. I understood that if I would have said yes to going to speak at my friend's anniversary, I was saying no to being at my son's football game, and my son's football game, being there, supporting him was more important to me. I hope that's a great takeaway for you. When it comes to you having to decide, do I say yes or do I say no to this event? Because people are going to constantly be asking you to do things. They're constantly going to be opportunities presented to you. But you only have a certain amount of time. You only have a certain amount of resources. When you say yes, give thought to what you're saying no to. Because too often, we're saying yes to people, we're saying yes to projects, but while we're saying yes to people and yes to projects, we're saying no, I can't be at your game. No, I can't be at your recital. No, I can't take you to the ball game. When you say yes, know what you're saying. Think about some of the things you're saying no to. When you say no, think about some of the things you're saying yes to. Let me wrap it up with some helpful steps that Means gives us around this topic and this subject. He said, you got to be honest with yourself. He said, identify and accept your limitations. We're limited in emotional energy. We're limited in physical energy. We're limited in time. And we're limited in our finances. You're not God. You can't do it all. And your first and most important project and assignment should be the welfare of your family. And so, will we ever? I don't think we ever have complete, total balance. But there needs to be a consciousness, and there needs to be a wrestling where we're trying to make sure we don't find ourselves in a place where we've created an unhealthy balance in our life. And an unhealthy balance is when our own personal health, our relationships with our spouse, significant other, and children are being neglected. And so, in essence, what we're saying to you tonight is, if you are an adrenaline junkie, and I think all of us are sometimes, spend your time wisely. Spend your resources wisely. You're not God. You're not omnipotent. You're not omnipresent. Your children, your significant other, your spouse values you more than things that are material. George and Chancellor, you give us your final thoughts to our audience, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, I would just like to say that to dovetail off what the pastor said, you also have to prioritize, because a lot of times we make decisions to do things, and when we reflect back on them, we sacrifice something that was more important, and usually it's our family. So I encourage you to not miss out on that quality time, because there are three things not coming back. That is the spoken word, an arrow in a bow, and missed opportunity. Those are my closing remarks, Pastor.
And I would just say that the pursuit of true values requires courage, commitment, sacrifice, and risk. And to do those things in pursuit of true values brings the reward that we've been talking about this evening.
As always, we thank you for tuning in to Man, those who are viewing now, and I'm sure there will be many others who will view this. If you have not, I really suggest you get this book, Men's Secret Wars by Patrick Means. It is a book that you will find to be transformative in your life. I thank my two brothers, Brother Chancellor, Brother George, for joining me to have these conversations. Men, you know we have these conversations all the time. We have them in the barber shops, under the tree, in the cigar lounges, at the tailgates, at the poker parties and events, all the social gatherings that we have. But most of the time, the topics are around sports and entertainment. Man to Man is about us having candid, honest conversations about things that will really transform our life. God bless you. I hope you have a champion week the rest of the week. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Man to Man.